All right, everyone. I think we're live here. But yeah, so welcome back to the second take. We just finished a long segment where we talked about a variety of different sports, FIBA World Cup, NBA, MLB playoffs, as well as the Premier League. And now we sort of want to transition into the MLS, the American Soccer League, which has been making waves in the past couple of weeks and years. It's been growing. It's a growing sport. And so Mark and Aiden, our MLS experts, will take the lead on this. But yeah, Aiden, Mark, take us away.
Yeah, so I'll start off with a question to you, Mark. You've been an MLS fan for a very long time. You've seen the league come from a lot smaller to what it is now. You've been following it closely. So just wanted to quickly ask you, like, have you how have you seen Messi's impact so far as like someone that was a big fan of the league beforehand? Like how have you reacted to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when Messi came, I think I had hesitancy. Obviously, it's insane to see the greatest player to ever play the best sport, most popular sport in the world in our domestic league. I think that's nothing but a net positive. But I think as someone who has followed the league for a while, I also knew that him coming going to open the league to a bunch of new eyes and fair share of criticism that was going to come this way. And I think we saw that a lot during Leagues Cup. He didn't play. MLS took a month break, for those unfamiliar, for kind of new expanded tournament with the Mexican teams and the MLS teams. That was Messi's kind of his first games with Inter Miami came through that. And we saw throughout that tournament where I think he scored 10 or 11 goals, got a number of assists as well, where the narrative quickly became, Messi's making MLS defenders look bad, or he's making MLS goalkeepers look bad. And yeah, Andre Blake, who has been, for those who don't know, one of the best keepers in MLS for the past at least half decade, and one of the best keepers in MLS history. He had a stinker in the semifinals. Miami won 4-1, right? But I think in general, what Messi has done is that he's just what MLS has built for the past 20 plus years. Messi's just opened more eyes to that. So the product is not changing as a result of Messi. I think he's just bringing more eyes to it. And I think it's cool to see, people starting to watch more, but at the same time, I think people have to be wary of, we talked about Guardiola earlier for Man City and how Messi, remember in the World Cup, right, when Messi made him look foolish. That's one of the most expensive defenders in the history of the game. And for people to now point to MLS and say, he's making, or MLS defenders are bad, right? Messi does this wherever he goes. He's the greatest ever. So I think it's been cool, but also, there's been pros and cons to it.
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting viewpoint because a lot of people just automatically assume more views, more eyes is a positive thing, but for a fan of the game, not always. But yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of comments online trying to compare it to the Saudi League, saying that it's still such a low level team. But I think I saw a tweet the other day about how I think MLS is like out of Europe sends the third or second most players to Europe out of any of the leagues. So I think it's underrated how much that the league has grown in terms of, like, I think also young talent. I mean, players like Thiago Almada, obviously Georgi Pekovic just went to Chelsea as well. I think people are being opened up to now, like how good these players actually are, and they're young, and a lot of them are even being developed in the United States, which is really interesting.
And I mean, I think like Inter Miami is the perfect example of that because people talk about Messi and Busquets and Jordi Alba certainly, but those three were accompanied by 3 U22 initiative signings. So they brought in Thomas Aviles from Argentina for $7 million. He's the most expensive center back in MLS history now, someone who they can definitely flip for, 15 million, potentially more to Europe in a couple of years. I think he's still a teenager. They brought in Facundo Farias. They also brought in Diego Gomez. And then they also have a ton of homegrown players. We're seeing Benjamin Kramaski, being looked at by both Argentina and the U.S. He's in national team camp right now, could potentially make his debut. They play today, right? 5:30.
Yeah, 5:30, yeah.
So we're recording this on the
Uzbekistan.
9th. So when you listen to this, Benjamin Kremasky could have a U.S. cap under his belt. They have
And a
no
goal.
bunch of other homegrowns as well. So the young talent is there. The league is younger than ever before, and they are exporting a huge number of players, which is great to see.
Yeah.
How do you guys
well,
how do you
got
guys
it.
think oh yeah, my bad. How do you guys think like the MLS is kind of gonna develop its player development and or farm system to kind of, I don't want to say rival European clubs, but at least like make American homegrown players want to stay, so that we have a lot more of these generational talents like Pulisic grow up through the MLS system as opposed to going overseas and going through the Chelsea farm system. How do you guys think that's going to kind of play out to at least have the possibility of having like a generational talent play for, who knows, Salt Lake City or Real Salt Lake City or something like that?
Well, what I'll say that right now is that MLS is not in a position where it can hold on to these guys. I think as cool as it would be to see, someone like a Kremasky spend his entire career in MLS, the reality is that MLS benefits more by becoming a player on the global market right now, which I think it has become, I think, over the past 3 years in particular. But I think we have to continue to I think for MLS to continue to be, or to continue to strive to become like the choice of league for young players, so they come here to develop and they get sold to Europe. I think that improves MLS perception abroad when you see a Miguel Almiron or a Georgi Petrovic, going over there and doing their thing. And for the record, I think Petrovic is going to win the starting job at Chelsea. I think he's going to single-handedly win them games. I think they're going to finish top 4 this year, and I think he's going to be a big part of that. So I think stuff like that has to happen. And then I think, keeping the Weston McKennies, the Chris Richards, that'll come down the line. But MLS is only 27, 28 years old right now. It's the youngest league in the world. It's also the fastest growing league in the world. So I think we have to continue selling players, and eventually that might shift. Aiden, do you see it differently, or?
Nah, I would agree. I think as the academies develop, also you're gonna have 3. Obviously, your top players are gonna leave to go to Europe, but then the level of the players after them is gonna increase. You can see that with NYCFC. Obviously, they couldn't hold on to Gio Reyna, they couldn't hold on to Joe Scally, but they have players like James Sands who spent a year at Rangers on loan, but he's still there at NYCFC. A lot of other really, really exciting young talent there. I think right now it benefits them to be able to sell those players onto Europe, get sell-on clauses. I think Philadelphia Union made a lot of money off of the Brendan Aronson transfers through sell-on clauses, and I think as the teams develop their academies, I think MLS Next, the talent coming through those teams and the tactical ability, like it's not just the technical thing that they're developing, but they're developing tactically a lot. I think you're going to see a lot of players that will still move to Europe, that like the best players, what's his name for Philly Union, the Quinn Sullivan's brother? Caven Sullivan. Like, he's not going to be at Philly Union ever. I don't think he'll make a senior appearance unless it's when he's like 16 years old. But Philly Union also has a bunch of really good talent. Jack McGlynn right now, 19 years old, starting center mid for the best team in the MLS. Looked at by multiple national teams as well. He'll stay with the U.S. though. He's not going to play for Ireland, but it's very interesting to see. And I think just as the academies produce, the level of talent and average talent is going to increase so much that even though you're not holding on to the best players, you're going to be holding on to multiple National League caliber players.
I just wanted to ask a question because, American soccer in general, obviously you have the U.S. men's national team, but we just had the U.S. women's national team with a disappointing loss in the Women's World Cup. They've dominated, that scene for a bit now, but something just seemed a little bit off, I guess, with the U.S. team this year. Maybe it was the chemistry that they had, the old and the new. So I guess for Aiden, Mark, and Eddie, just if you guys have any opinions about the NWSL, National Women's Soccer League, as well as the talent and the, programs that they have for these women.
Well, I think if I can jump in first, I think that this loss needed to happen for the U.S. women's national team, if I'm being completely honest. And it's not one of those things where I'm rooting against them. Obviously, I think anytime a U.S. team steps in a World Cup, we want them to win. I think that's natural, but I kind of think it's similar to happen with the German men's national team program. Actually, a while back when then kind of sparked what they call like Das Reboot. There's a book about it. You can read it, and kind of led to them kind of reforming their domestic leagues, their national team program, and then winning the 2014 World Cup. I think similar thing for U.S. women's national team now, where I think the reality is just that the rest of the world has, I don't know if I think caught up is maybe a bit extreme, because I still think that the infrastructure and whatnot the U.S. has had in place for years now is still gives them a slight edge. But the rest of the world has improved at such a rapid rate, and I think the U.S. women's national team is deserves a lot of credit for that. But now it's at a point where they have to level up. I think they may have been resting on their laurels a little too much. I think they've been holding on to maybe some of the older players from previous World Cup winning teams, Megan Rapinoe in particular. I don't think she should have been on this roster. I don't know what she was doing there, to be completely honest. Megan, if you want to come on our pod, happy to have you on though. But no, I just think in general, rest of the world, women's soccer, it's gotten bigger. You see massive crowds, Barcelona, Mexico, things like that. And I think the U.S. just has to use this, Matt Crocker, sporting director, another guy we hope to have on the pod at some point. Shout out Matt, and whoever else is in charge of that program moving forward. Just have to reassess it and make the necessary changes.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like the U.S. women's national team loss is kind of a testament to two things. One, I really think it's kind of like Mark mentioned, like ushering out this older age of U.S. women's soccer and kind of telling us or signaling to the general public that we need to start focusing on the youth and really transitioning to kind of developing our younger players and kind of just repositioning our structure as a team overall. But I also think it just shows that the rest of the world has really, or a lot of the rest of the world has started to focus on funding women's sports a lot more, which is an incredible thing. Like 20, 30 years ago, when the Women's World Cup first started gaining steam and the US was just steamrolling everybody, is because we were really the only ones that comparably were willing to put any sort of money into funding our women's national team. And the fact that we got, in a way, embarrassed on the national stage kind of shows, or on the international stage shows, that a lot more of these countries are willing to put significant funding towards women's national teams, which is an incredible thing, not only for women's soccer, but for women's sports as a whole. And I really think it's a necessary thing that needs to happen. Like we can't be the dominant force in women's soccer just perpetually if we want the sport to advance as a whole and for the rest of the world to embrace women's soccer for how important it is. We need to be competitive, and which it has been, and I think it's a great thing overall.
Yeah, just to quickly go back to Shavane's question too, I wanted to just touch on the NWSL a little bit. It's gone through a lot of difficulties in the past few years. There was issues with the CBA, in which you saw a lot of the best players leave the league actually to go play in Europe for a year or two because they disagreed with what was going on. They wanted a better CBA, so they left. CBA got resolved. A lot of those star players are back now. The other big issue, which was actually made a lot of national media headlines, was the mistreatment of players by upper management. It was a really, really league-wide, massive issue. A lot of the head coaches, executives, even assistant coaches, stuff like that, there was allegations. I don't know. I'm just going to say allegations of sexual and mental abuse on the players. This was exposed by multiple players. They've done a lot of documentaries about it, and I think so there's still investigations ongoing about that stuff. But there's been a big league-wide clear out of a lot of that stuff. So I'm hoping that it's becoming it's gonna becoming a new league, a lot of new young coaches, hopefully, that have better mentalities about that kind of stuff. Um, the players hopefully will now be able to feel more comfortable playing in those leagues and developing as young players. But I think also the NWSL is an exciting time. There's a lot of young talent coming through. I mean, even in DC, the Washington Spirit have two excellent players that were probably the most talented players on the national team this year. And a lot of players from Europe are actually coming to NWSL. Unless you're playing on the top 5 or 6 teams in Europe, you're not going to make the money that you can make in the NWSL just because of the advertising and TV broadcasting rights that you have here. So I think in terms of growing the game here, I think it's only going to skyrocket, and I think it'll continue to be the top league. I don't see it ever losing that title. So.
And we have Sophia Smith nominated for the Ballon d'Or. She was starting for the women's national team at the World Cup, young player. Alyssa Thompson, I think she's only 18 years old.
Yeah,
she's a stud.
FC. Sorry,
he said she's a stud.
Oh, she is.
Little stud, yeah. She's a beast.
All these young players. So I think, I just think with the reassessment of kind of the program and NWSL as a whole, things like that, I think women's soccer in the U.S. can continue to thrive. But again, to go back to the initial question, I think that what happened in the World Cup was necessary in order to kind of spark that, hopefully, long-term change.
Yep.
Awesome. Sorry, I was muted. Second take, Faithful. But yeah, that was our American soccer segment. We just wanted to introduce that to the podcast and the developments that have been taking place there. But just as a last thing for our show today, we wanted to go into a fantasy football and NFL preview for week 1. This is being filmed on Saturday, September 9th. So one game has already taken place this week, which was the Kansas City Chiefs against the Detroit Lions. And wow, did the Lions show up. The Lions came to play. The Lions, took some punches, but they eventually came back and won that game at the end. I think the Chiefs should have won that game, but there were some crucial drops at that time. So for this part of the fantasy segment, NFL segment, what we'll be doing is we'll be taking you through the 2 best quarterbacks for our picks for the week, 2 best running backs, 2 best wide receivers, 2 best tight ends, and then we can go from there. So I'm just going to give my fantasy star-studded team of the week for you guys out there, and I hope this comes to fruition when this show airs on Monday. So I like Lamar Jackson this week. I think Lamar Jackson is going to play out of his mind this year. Lamar Jackson is on a new contract, and he's got a wide receiver by the name of Odell Beckham Jr., along with Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman. And Lamar Jackson is also facing the Houston Texans this week, second worst team in the NFL. So I love Lamar Jackson there. The second quarterback that I like is Justin Fields, coming off a career year. He is going to be a big factor in the Bears' successes this year. He's got a new wide receiver in DJ Moore, who's come over from Carolina. And I think Justin Fields against the Packers this week is actually a very good pick. Eddie, do you agree with those?
Yeah, I mean, Justin Fields is my pick. He kind of stole that one from me. Fields is huge sleeper for me. I wasn't able to snag him in any of my fantasy leagues. Unfortunately, went off the board pretty early. But he is just I have a lot of faith in him, both in fantasy and in terms of a player overall. In terms of fantasy, he's just a stud. Just gets so many rushing yards. Doesn't make a ton of mistakes, especially in the second half of the season last year. Struggled in the first half, but he's improved tremendously. I really expect him to make a huge leap, especially against the Packers team that I think is going to be reeling a lot this year, especially their defense. Other week 1 sleeper quarterbacks, I really like Tua, honestly, against the Chargers. We'll see how he comes out and plays this year after obviously all the injury problems last year. But I'm not too big on that Chargers defense. I love the Chargers offense, but I'm not really huge in the Chargers defense going into this year. We'll see how that all plays out. Otherwise, I mean, my fantasy quarterback in a lot of leagues is Jalen Hurts. He has a tough matchup against the Patriots, so we'll see how he does.
Sure.
But he's just a stud overall. Overall, a tough week one for fantasy quarterbacks. Honestly, just looking at the schedule. Another one maybe is Trevor Lawrence against the Colts.
Yeah.
Might be an easier matchup, but a lot of the top tier quarterbacks have a little bit of tougher matchups, and kind of segueing into the RBs. Some RBs, not really like the top running backs, at least this week, but some guys that I really like for matchups. Mentioning the Dolphins again, Raheem Mostert is pretty much uncontested in that backfield right now with Jeff Wilson Jr. and IR and Devin Achane injured. Like, he's going to get a ton of touches, even though Miami's not a super run dominant team. That's a guy that's pretty much a must start, at least for the first few weeks in fantasy. Otherwise, I think Nick Chubb for the Browns against the Bengals just going to go off, especially with Joe Burrow coming back from injury. They're going to be a little bit careful with getting him out in bootleg formations and dropping back in the pocket. So I think that game's going to be very run heavy. Joe Mixon's going to get a lot of action for the Bengals. But for the Browns, I really think that Nick Chubb's going to get a lot of work with Deshaun Watson not really being fully back in stride yet, and him needing to get his rhythm. So I think that's going to be a battle of running backs with Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb both being great RB1s in that fantasy matchup. What are your thoughts, Shavain?
Yeah, I like those picks. Those are different than what I picked. The picks I made, I love DeAndre Swift this week. I think as a new running back on that Eagles offense, they always seem to find a way to work him in, right? Jalen Hurts, he throws the ball the majority of the time. He rolls out into play action, runs that bootleg. But they are a pretty good running team. Miles Sanders had some success on that squad. I love DeAndre Swift this week against the Patriots. Another one that I love, I actually traded him away because I got a really, really good deal for Lamar Jackson, Cam Akers. J.K. Dobbins. I think J.K. Dobbins, if he stays healthy this year, is going to be an animal fantasy-wise. Not really a big pass-catching back, but he will have 23, 24 carries a game, rack up upwards of 110 yards, and he'll put the ball in the end zone at least once a game if that offense is churning on all cylinders. So that's what I love in terms of running backs this week. Now segueing into the wide receivers, my, I guess, top two wide receivers this week, Tyreek Hill. I mean, he's an animal. He's a beast. He is one of the best wide receivers in the league after, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. But I think Tyreek Hill is going to feast against that Chargers secondary. And then another wide receiver that I actually really, really like, DK Metcalf. A lot of people were shying away from him in the drafts, especially in my league. I didn't pick him because they have a very, very diverse, I guess, pass catching.
They've got three guys: Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, Jigba, and then DK Metcalf. There's a lot of production back there, but they have a really easy matchup this week against the Rams. I think he's going to go off.
Exactly. What are your picks for wide receivers this week?
Honestly, I mean, just looking at I don't want to say sleepers, but guys that I think that are just good to pay attention to over the next few weeks, with Cooper Kupp probably going on IR. A guy that I'm not going to start this week, and actually definitely not going to start this week, but definitely keep an eye on, is Van Jefferson. He's going to be pretty much undisputed number one wide receiver in that Rams offense. If he's on waivers in your league, you got to pick him up. Just essential bench piece for if Cooper Kupp's going to be out a while. I think CeeDee Lamb is going to go off this week, unfortunately, against my Giants. We don't really have a lockdown corner that can kind of keep them in check. We have a great defense overall, but I think CeeDee Lamb fantasy-wise is just going to be a stud this week. Like you said, Tyreek Hill. I have Tyreek in a couple of leagues. I think he's going to be great.
Yeah.
Some of the other top guys do have tough matchups this week, though. Looking at the Niners, Deebo Samuel has tough matchup against the Steelers. The Raiders are playing the Broncos, so Devontae's going to have to go against Pat Surtain. It's a tough week one, honestly, fantasy-wise. Jefferson does have an easier matchup against the Buccaneers. I mean, it's not really a bold prediction saying that Jefferson's going to go off, but who knows? We might have a 30 or 40-point week one, depending on how that plays out.
Surely.
And rookies to pay attention to, or young guys to pay attention to, I think Jahan Dotson on the Commanders having that easy week 1 matchup against the Cardinals, he could be a sneaky flex play in deeper leagues, and I think he could definitely win some leagues. I mean, I'm going to try and stay away from the young guys. I made the mistake of starting Sky Moore in one of my leagues on Thursday, and that didn't work out for me. But if you're looking for any young guys to pick, I think Jahan Dotson is the way to go week 1.
All right, Eddie. Well, let's get our tight end picks in. I'll do one tight end. You do one tight end of what we like this week, and then we'll wrap up this episode of Second Take with our game of the week for the NFL. My tight end pick, I'm biased because I picked him, and I think he's going to have an outstanding year. Darren Waller. I think that Giants offense presents him an opportunity to be the lead receiver on that team. I think he, needed a change of scenery from Oakland, and although he produced well in Oakland, I think this offense, this Giants' new and improved offense, presents a wonderful opportunity. So I love Darren Waller this week against the Cowboys, but I also love him this year.
Yeah, I mean, I got to agree with that. I'm a Giants fan. That was going to be my pick too. Waller, just watching the limited reps that he and Daniel Jones had together in preseason, was just a stud and was getting so many targets. Yeah. He's going to be pretty much the functioning wide receiver 1 for that team. He's going to get a lot of reps, and I think he's going to be great in fantasy if he can stay healthy, and he's going to be a stud for us overall. So I'm really happy to have him. Other than Waller, though, a guy that I really think is, I don't want to say a sleeper, but it's just going to be a beast in fantasy is TJ Hawkinson on the Vikings. Jefferson's going to get pretty much doubled, even tripled, pretty much every game this year. A lot of people have been talking about that's going to open up opportunities for rookie Jordan Addison, I think his name is. But he might be good, but more than anything, I think that's just going to make Hawkinson just get a ton of targets because he's obviously like an established pass catcher in the NFL. Addison might be good, but with Jefferson getting so much attention, I think that's just going to make Hawkinson like very, very highly targeted guy, especially with Minnesota transferring to more of a pass-heavy team than a run-heavy team. Yeah. Obviously getting rid of Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison being a decent back, but being much more of a pass-catching back relative to what Cook was. So I think Hawkinson has potential to be like tight end 2, tight end 3 this year. I wouldn't say tight end 1 unless Kelsey's injured, but we'll see.
Yeah. No, those are wonderful tight end picks. And to just cap off this segment, our game of the week this week, my game of the week is going to be America's game of the week, 4:25 on Fox, I believe. The Eagles versus the Patriots. I just think it's a Super Bowl rematch from a couple years ago. Obviously, a very different looking team on both sides, but I think that's going to be a game to watch. And I think the Patriots could pull it off. They've got a new and improved offense. I heard something about Ramondre Stevenson missing practice yesterday, but if he's not able to go, they do have Ezekiel Elliott. So that is my game of the week and America's game of the week. Eddie, it's your pick.
I mean, honestly, I got a pick from each section of the window. Honestly, the 1 o'clock games, I really like Bengals versus Browns. There's been a lot of trash talk in between those guys over this week. A couple teams that are looking to really get over the hump this year, especially the Browns. They really have the potential to be great, but just haven't been obviously that team yet. Haven't been able to establish it with Deshaun. The 4:25 window, Dolphins Chargers, I think is going to be a sneakily really, really good game, really high-powered offensive game. Yeah. The Sunday Night Football matchup, Cowboys Giants, should be pretty good. And then my game of the week personally, Bills Jets Monday Night Football. I'm not super high on the Jets this year, but I think that's just going to be an awesome showdown. Like Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, just lots of talent and stars on each side. Doesn't get much better than that, especially on Monday Night Football. So that's going to be one I'm going to be watching for sure.
Awesome. And this is breaking news just now, actually. Cooper Kupp was placed in the IR.
There you go. Van Jefferson, wide receiver 1.
Yeah, Eddie, you called it. But if Mark and Aiden want to just hop back in here for a second, just so we can say goodbye to our viewers. Thank you all for listening in, and I hope you guys really, really enjoyed the segment. This being our first podcast of Second Take, we are really excited for feedback and the guests that we'll have in the future. There's a lot of sports in this world, and there's a lot more to talk about. So Mark, Aiden, Eddie, thank you guys so much for being here today. And we will see you, the viewers, next week. on the second take.
Thanks, guys.